So welcome everyone to businessadvising.org webinar. We are lucky enough to have Noah Alper with us today, who's of course the founder of Noah's Bagels and Bread and Circus. He has over 4 decades of experience as an entrepreneur with concept marketing, retail, sales, management experience, and he's been a experienced consultant and mentor to many of the businesses in our network today. He's got a great book, Business Mensch, and we'll be sending a link to that after this webinar with a lot of his lessons learned throughout his career, and also a link to noahalperconsulting.com, where he was being gracious enough to say if you have any questions afterwards, to feel free to reach out to him. So Noah, with that, I'll turn it over to you, and I was hoping we could have a little discussion this morning. And what I think a lot of us would really like to know, and maybe from the top, is to understand your journey a little bit. You're a success story of an entrepreneur who made it, and a lot of the entrepreneurs in our network want to know, what's your background? What was your journey like? What was your entrepreneur story? And how can they learn from your success?
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you very much to all of you for tuning in this morning. In talking to Ellie, previous to this webinar, he mentioned that, all of you are folks who have gotten small businesses up off the ground, and you're starting to see some traction and some advancement. And as you probably know, that's a major, major accomplishment. Just to get a venture going, number one. Number two, to be in growth phase. It's an incredible achievement, and you should be very proud of yourselves. You should also be proud of yourselves, I would say, for reaching out to organizations like businessadvising.org, because many entrepreneurs fall into the trap of, oh, I'm having some success, I'm brilliant, I'm a genius, I don't need any help, and they succeed in some cases, and in many cases they succeed for a little while, and then they go sideways because some areas of expertise that they really need aren't there, and they're too either egotistical or shy or wrapped up in what they're doing or whatever to reach out. And you folks aren't that way. You have made the effort. I think that's wonderful. My journey started sort of from the ground up, literally, selling salad bowls on the sidewalk in Cambridge, in Massachusetts, in 1971. I had seen some seconds, if any of you know what seconds are. They're not 100%, they're almost 100%. But in this case, these seconds look like firsts, and they were very well priced. They were rustic salad bowls, which in 1971 was the rage. Everything was natural, back to the land, back to nature. And these salad bowls, I just saw them, and I can't tell you how excited I got about these salad bowls. It was a love affair. It wasn't for another person, but it was for these salad bowls. That was sort of how powerful the love was, which, in a certain way, everything I've done, the products are the key. I really love the products, and not everyone has that luxury to be able to be in business with products that they love, but it certainly has helped me to at least have some passion and real enthusiasm for what you're doing, what you're selling. So I sold these salad bowls literally on the sidewalk as an itinerant street peddler. And then my wife at the time was very interested in natural foods. And so we decided to get indoors, if you will, with our business. So she loved natural foods. I loved these salad bowls, these rustic housewares. And we decided to put them together into a store called Bread and Circus. If any of you are Latin scholars, you would know panis circenses. Had to do with the Roman Empire when the emperors didn't have enough food to feed the peasants. They would bring wandering troubadours through to keep their mind off the fact that they were starving. So in a certain sense, that was the concept. I had heard that Latin term. It's the only Latin term I know, but it was enough to give me the name of the store. And at that time, these stores, Natural Foods was just beginning. So there was a huge learning curve in terms of, explaining to our customers what the heck we were actually selling in there. But there was also a time when these stores were sort of like just post-hippie era, with everything from wind chimes to plants to wooden toys to you name it. So we came by our name correctly in terms of the bread and circus, the essentials and the non-essentials. The business was a little slow to begin, but continued to accelerate as the knowledge of natural foods increased amongst our customers. The circus part scaled down and the bread part scaled up because we saw the clear trend that natural foods was going to be that business. So the store continued to do well. We expanded into a second storefront, but it was a situation where I just felt I couldn't sit in that retail store any longer. So it's a very personal decision, and decided to get out. We sold the business to an Irish immigrant by the name of Anthony Arnott, who built that business up from one small storefront in Brookline, Massachusetts, to the largest natural foods chain in the Northeast. And in 1995, Bread and Circus got sold to a Whole Foods Market. And it is Whole Foods Market now with units throughout the Northeast. I can't take credit for that. I cannot take credit for that. That was Anthony's doing. But what I felt was that I was able to give him a business that had a solid base, had a good reputation, and he took it from there and developed it very nicely. I went off in a different branch and got back to the housewares and went into it on a wholesale basis to, at the time, catalog houses, department stores, small retail cookware shops, of which there were many. I've been around and seen so many businesses come and go that were tremendous fads at one point, and then had developed into mainstream consumer trends. And like many or most things in business, the big fish swallow up the little fish, and there aren't a million cookware stores around anymore. There aren't, for that matter, a million natural food stores around anymore because Whole Foods Market has been kind of a category disruptor. So, I've seen that again and again, and it's something obviously to be mindful of when you're starting your businesses. Are you going to be one of the survivors and getting the help you need to be that survivor? So this wholesale housewares business developed nicely. At the end, we had over 2,000 accounts nationwide, again, many of them small accounts. We had sales teams in various regions of the country representing us. By that point, we were no longer the wooden salad bowls from Vermont, but the business became Alper International, because I have such a small ego that I was able to not be uncomfortable calling it that. But truth be told, it was international in the sense that we imported from 8 countries and sold nationwide in America, and did pretty well with it until 1984, when I came to a kind of a juncture. We were still doing well, but we were sort of too small to be big and too big to be small, in the sense that we had a fairly big overhead. By then, as I mentioned before, competition, always be mindful of. Competition was coming in, and in this sense, they were a little bit more primary than we were, that they were owning factories overseas and not just buying and selling from factories, which is what we were doing. So there was a little bit of a competitive disadvantage in our structure. And I basically saw the handwriting on the wall that we either get big or we get out. And it was somewhat the same with the natural foods, but especially with the housewares business. And so I opted for the latter. we were able to sell the business to a companion product and had a chance to take a little bit of time off and basically on somewhat of a whim decided to go to Israel. I'm Jewish, but wasn't brought up with very much background. But it was more of a vacation spot for me after having worked very hard the housewares business. But during that trip to Israel, I got very, very excited about Israel and about supporting Israel. And I decided that I wanted to go into a business that would, again, tie my passions, as I indicated earlier, for products or for a concept in with a business idea. So the idea was Ronald Reagan was president, and I had heard on the radio one day that 1/3 of Americans had admitted to a born-again Christian conversion. And so I was never great at math, but what I realized was that represented something in the neighborhood at the time of about 80 million people. So I figured with 80 million people interested in fundamentalist Christianity, there was got to be a way to be able to sell things from the Holy Land to that population. And so it was everything from holy water to videos to jewelry to you name it. And I succeeded in offending every branch of Christianity by the product lines that I had, because what I came to learn later was that Mormons don't like crosses, and nobody but Catholics like holy water. And so the fundamental thing I'm trying to say is that I had no idea who my customer was, and I was fishing in the right pond, but I don't think I had the right fishing rod at all. And so that business lasted about 6 months, and then I had one real big flurry of orders. I thought things were turning around, and then the next day, it was like, one order a week. So I came to a juncture after having 2 successful businesses that this thing wasn't making it. And I had lost something in the neighborhood of $50,000, especially at that time was a lot of money. It's not insignificant now. And furthermore, I had 2 kids by that time and a third on the way, and the fun and games were over. And so there was a question as what I was going to do with myself, and I was really, I had lost a little confidence in my entrepreneurial abilities. I was actually looking for a job, which is something that was a sort of a foreign concept to me. But at about that time, I was told I was too old and too entrepreneurial and no one was going to hire me. And I was a little bit in a quandary what to do when my brother came along and said to me, why don't you do bagels in Berkeley? And I'm like, I've never baked a bagel in my life, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. The whole thing didn't sound great. But I don't know if any of you have brothers and sisters, but typically those that do, older ones, you sort of do what you're told. Basically, what at least what I did. He was 5 years older, so I did what I was told in the sense that I said, all right, listen, Dan, I'll look into it. I'm not telling you that I'm going to do it, but I'll look into it. You see, also the flip side of the older brother telling you what to do is that if it's a good relationship, your family members and friends have your best interest at heart. And the way he said it to me, I don't know, I just paid attention. So I did look into it. I spent from the time that he gave me the idea to the time we opened the first Noah's Bagel store, it was a year. And during that year, what I discovered was that bagels were becoming a national phenomenon. They had started out as an ethnic specialty in pockets of the Northeast, in Jewish ethnic neighborhoods, much like pizza was when I was growing up. I'm old enough to remember when we had to go to an Italian neighborhood to get pizza. And it's hard to believe now, but it was the truth. And bagels was like that. But then I saw it becoming mainstream. And so you had that going for it. You also had my new and adopted home because I'd moved out from New England to California, and seeing that there was great ethnic cuisine of all descriptions in the San Francisco Bay region, except there weren't great bagels. So there were two factors that merged in the sense that, big national trend emerging, local demand would be there. And I think, as importantly, I was able to find a wonderful recipe that was just tremendous. And so put all that together and opened the first Noah's Bagel store in August 4th, which is coming up, of 1989. And what was really remarkable was, as much in the pits as Holy Land Gifts Company was, Noah's Bagels was the opposite. It was like this roller coaster where I hit the bottom and then, whoa, it was just a huge ascendancy. From day one, it just was, kicking it, if you will. I think, we had a great recipe. We had great employee morale, and I wanted to stress that. Ellie's mentioned that many of you are creating jobs, and from my dad, who was really my mentor and my teacher, I learned that, without your customers, without your community, you're nowhere. And so we really fostered a team atmosphere. We empowered our employees. We gave back to the community in many, many ways as a business. It was a personal decision. It was a business decision. It was all, the right thing to do, and it paid off very, very well in the sense that having left Bread and Circus because I didn't want to be in the retail business any longer in 1971, by the time we sold it in Noah's in 1996, we had 38 stores from Seattle to Los Angeles. So certainly never say never in business, because you just never know what's gonna happen. Post Noah's, sold the business in '96 to one of the big fish, if you will, that we talked about earlier, who were rolling up bagel chains throughout the United States. This is more in the way of talking about an exit, and there was a real decision as to whether to sell our business to them. Initially, they wanted to just give us stock and not cash, and we didn't have a real confident sense in their ability to perpetuate things the way we felt it should be perpetuated. They were more about, the stock and the stock price and the valuation of the business and so forth, than they were making those sales every day. And it just was of concern to us. So we rejected their offer and ran into a big risk, because they said that if we didn't sell it to them, they would open up across from every one of our stores, one of our 38 stores. So from having very little competition all the way through, very late in the game, we had big competition. That's another lesson I wanted to stress, was always keep your head over, looking behind you at who's coming along, even though you're doing really well, and which we did. We had a solid organization, and so we said, you know what, we're going to take these folks on, because we're not going to just take stock for this business. A year later, they came back. Did say never and say never. They came back. They offered us a full cash offer, which was quite generous, and we took it. And we avoided bagel blood on the streets of the West Coast as a result. But more specifically, a year later, they actually went bankrupt. So and the whole business got sold, and these small chains that had been rolled up by this big conglomerate all got about 10 cents on the dollar. So I think that our team was very wise in postponing and having the confidence that we could do it. By then, the business had developed. We had venture capital financing. We had private equity, and actually Starbucks was 20% owner Noah's at that time, which was a very synergistic partnership. So that was Noah's, sold it in 96, lived a dream in the sense of going back to Jerusalem and studying in the yeshiva, which is a traditional Jewish place of learning, for a year with my family. It was a tremendous year. Came back and was tapped to help found the Jewish Community High School of the Bay. We didn't have a Jewish high school here in San Francisco area. We were able to get that open. It's in its 11th year now. Since then, I opened a kosher Italian restaurant in downtown Berkeley. We had a nice 4-year run, but then we took the dust, if you will. Can't win them all, folks. And I've gone from there to, as Ellie said, I've written a book called Business Mensch, which some people think is good, and you may as well. And now I'm doing a small business consulting, and I love working with entrepreneurs, and that, I think, Ellie, brings us up to date.
Yeah, it brings us up to date. That's fantastic background, Noah. And you know, I think what's especially valuable is not just the successes, but also the lessons learned along the way. So, folks, just to remind everyone, in the bottom left-hand corner is a chat window. You can ask Noah any questions in the chat window, and I'll read them out to Noah. So, bottom left-hand corner, enter any questions you have. Noah, so one of the things I want to ask you is, the businesses we work with are typically in a growth phase. You know, they're up and running, they're operational now, they're looking to grow and expand. And as someone who's run and expanded several businesses, what are some of the lessons learned or advice you have around managing growth, about scaling up and doing it too fast and trying to control your growth but also maximize potential? What can you share with folks?
Great question. Well, I'd share it in the way of an anecdote. As I mentioned, that first store on College Avenue in Berkeley was a tremendous success. And very shortly after, I had a regular customer who came in, and he would literally beat on me every Sunday to, why aren't you opening up on Solano Avenue? I mean, what? Goodness sakes, you know, you're doing so well, you know. And I said to him, sir, we'll open on Solano Avenue when we're ready to. Big temptation, you get one business and just like, let's take it to the moon. I didn't feel like we had the systems and the personnel and the whole thing tight enough to go further. And that you know, I'm from New England. We build things brick by brick in New England. That's how we built Noah's. You know, there's a Yiddish phrase some of you might be familiar with called being a chazer, which is literally a pig. So, you know, if you're a chazer and you're, I'm doing great, I'm just going to gobble up everything. Well, great, but if you're not ready to do that, you know, if you're not really positioned to do that, it's probably not a good idea, because it's growth is very difficult. And I just, from personal experience, you want to make sure everything's really tight and you feel in your gut that, you know, you can handle that growth, and that second store can be or second, whatever it is, can be as strong as the first one. In retail, location. I mean, it's very tricky to find the right location. There's a lot that goes into it. It's a very sophisticated process. Many people don't, you know, spend enough time really drilling down on, yeah, it's a high volume place, but is this, you know, I give you a personal example. I mentioned the restaurant that I had that didn't make it eventually. And I got literally seduced by the amount of traffic that was walking by that restaurant. I mean, it was streams of traffic. The problem was that it wasn't our customers who were streaming by that restaurant. I felt I could capture enough of them to make it work. Truth is, I couldn't, because they just weren't our customer. They were college kids. They weren't interested in a sit-down Italian restaurant, no matter how inexpensive a lunch we put out, which we did. So that, you know, it's a little bit of a branch, but thinking about all the parameters of what a second location or an expanded business looks like before you get into it is a very, very wise and prudent and important thing to do.
Well, and speaking of growth, a lot of the businesses that we work with are looking to raise capital to do that growth, to make that growth. And a lot of them are doing friends and family rounds. They're not ready for venture capital dollars or private equity, but friends and family, and that can get a little tricky. Have you experienced some of that?
Absolutely. When I opened Noah's, the brother gave me the idea, but I was the one that did it. Of course, a year later, after it was succeeding, the brother wanted in, and I let him. And I'm glad I did, because he had all kinds of talent that I didn't have, and vice versa. It was a good partnership. I wanted to throw that in. But in terms of the financing of it, yeah, I had to borrow money from those two brothers, my older brother and the brother that gave me the idea to do the bagels. I couldn't have opened without them. But I would say this to all of you, that friends and family, you can pretty much count on it being a one-shot endeavor if the thing doesn't make it. So be very, very careful, because going back to the well to friends and family after you failed is not going to be easy, or probably would be more like impossible unless they're very good friends or they're very close family. So you want to do it gently and make sure that, if it was your money, that you would feel comfortable about doing it. And as a matter of fact, I would encourage as much as possible to be able to put some sort of, quote, skin in the game, end quote, into it, because it's always seen favorably, very favorably, by those that might be wanting to assist.
Yeah, and we got a question come in, and I know we were saying about Q&A at the end, but this one is sort of right on topic, so I'm going to surprise you with it.
Okay.
And this question says, we've had trouble deciding whether to take out loans and try to expand from our own cash versus taking investments in exchange for equity. What tips do you have for choosing when to take outside investment?
I would say, as much as possible, debt financing is going to be, in the long term, the successful business is going to be a whole lot cheaper than giving up equity in the business. So as long as if your growth trajectory isn't so steep, in terms of a curve, there it is, that you just need cash so badly that you have to bring in equity partners. If you have the patience, if you will, or the time frame to grow more slowly, debt financing is going to be, in the long run, a whole lot cheaper. Something I was going to say, and it just totally went by me. You'll have to excuse me. Yes, now I remember. But there is an offset. There is an offset in the following sense. I forget exactly what the term is called, but I think it's fundamentally smart money. So in other words, if you have a potential equity partner who can really bring a lot to the table, that can change the equation. Like in our case, when we brought in Starbucks, they were tremendous in terms of location acquisitions, because they had such clout out in the world. They were a bigger company than we were. We got locations together, and boy, a Noah's and a Starbucks together, it was a powerful combination. And their real estate people were very savvy. Deals were coming to them. They didn't have to go out looking too hard. The advice that they had to share with us on many other facets of the business that they had, because they were, larger, more established company, was very important. So if it's just a straight decision, equity versus debt, I'd go for debt. But if if there are extenuating circumstances, specifically vis-a-vis smart money, it may be an offset in terms of that question.
Fantastic. Thank you. In the entrepreneurs that you deal with, throughout your career that you've engaged with, and maybe some lessons from your own life, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see business owners making?
Let me count the ways. Everything from, I think the biggest, if you want to, I don't know, what comes to mind is something we alluded to earlier, which is, typically business starts with one person. Then they hopefully bring in a team. But from the inception, it's one person. And everybody has strengths and weaknesses and experience and so forth. One person is a very, it's got a very limited scope of business. And so going on, instincts and knowledge and so forth that just coming from you is inherently very problematic. So, not that necessarily you need to bring in partners right away, but you need to go and get some advice right away. And a lot of that advice can come through businesses or organizations like business advising. Can also come from having lunch with people who know a lot more than you do about certain topics. And you'd be surprised at how many people would be very happy to come and have lunch, take them to a nice place, and tell them up front what you're looking for. A lot of people are flattered to be offered something like that. You'd be surprised, even people with much success. So building that team, even if it's a virtual team, even if hypothetically you bring in a consultant, you might have to pay that consultant and not just get out for a free lunch. But I mean, I think if I drill down on it, what's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make? It's typically not having a broad enough perspective on their business to be able to make the right decisions on, especially strategic issues that surface.
And for the growing companies that we have in our network, they're starting to hire some of their first employees. What advice for a growing business that's looking to hire, could you share?
Well, in our case, we hired sort of ahead of the curve, if you will. We put our resources into people. That was really important to us to have the right people. So we in one case, postponed building a larger production facility until we were kind of, over capacity even, in favor of hiring very talented people ahead of when we really needed them. As an example, when we had 9 stores, we hired a guy to run our retail operations who had run 400 Taco Bells in the Southwest region. Now, in that case, going back to your previous question, we weren't able to, come anything close to matching the salary that this individual was making, with Taco Bell, but we were able to give him an equity stake in the business, and that was an enticing offer because there was some real upside there. So hiring people who are very talented, and in some cases we waited till we had the right people, especially in the more senior roles, and it wasn't easy because we needed to fill those jobs, but we just weren't in a position to hire someone who, number one, didn't have real competency, and number two, didn't fit into our culture. We had at Noah's anyway, we had a culture, we called it sort of the hire thing, which meant, we were going to give back to the community, we were going to treat everyone as fairly as we could, a whole host of sort of intangible things that one could say were warm and fuzzy, whatever. That's how we did things, and we found people that were very competent, but a little gruff and tough. We just didn't hire them. So competency, cultural fit, treating them well and part of the team all the way through, that they were important. I remember going into stores and asking clerks what they thought about how the display cases looked, and they looked at me like, I can't believe he's asking me this question. You know, he's the guy who started this whole thing, and I'm 19 years old, and he wants to know what I think. Well, I did want to know what they thought, and knowing that helped me out to make changes and keep me in the game and not up in the cloud somewhere, which is the surest way in an expansion mode to sink the whole thing when you're out of touch with really what's going on the ground.
That's a great lesson right there. You spoke about your exit from Noah's Bagels and from your other businesses earlier. You know, a lot of the businesses that we're working with, right, they're operational, they're growing, it's very exciting for them. But, you know, often they'll ask us questions of, you know, eventually I'm going to want to exit this. Right now I'm still building it, but eventually I'm going to want to exit. How do I start positioning the business for an eventual exit? And what do I need to be thinking about now for then?
Great question. Again, a solid structure, hopefully with highly competent people who may or may not proceed in through the next business. But I think it's almost sort of the opposite of that. I think it would be important to structure the business in such a way that it isn't totally personality driven, that this, you know, amazing entrepreneur, without that person, the whole thing would fall down. So, you know, build a structure that someone else who's not you, who has different skills, can jump in, is important. I think, you know, like I did with the housewares business, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs, and I totally understand it, it's a natural phenomenon, but they're so invested and focused on their operational day-to-day enterprises that they don't take time to look around at the horizon. And my dad used to say this, you know, you've got to get up at 30,000 feet and look at the industry and the trends and where things are going. And, you know, then it's really important to take time out during the week to look at the big picture and how you're positioned, and because what is today is not going to be what is tomorrow. The business is very dynamic; it changes fast, and you've got to be ahead of the game. You can't be playing catch up. So, like I said about, you know, Alper International, I saw the industry at large, you know, going in a consolidated fashion. The businesses were getting bigger, and the small fish were getting squeezed out. The trick was we weren't squeezed out yet, but we probably would have been had we stayed in. And so, you know, getting ahead of the game, and I think also in terms of the sale, a lot of entrepreneurs, a mistake they make is they wait to wring out the last nickel out of the thing. And by that time, sometimes it can be too late. And I think in the case of Noah's, you know, people have said to me, well, you know, you were doing fantastically well. Why did you sell out? Well, yes, we were doing well, but, you know, truth be told is that we'd opened stores in the Pacific Northwest, and we'd opened stores in Los Angeles, and it wasn't the same as they were in Northern California, where we were super strong. There were new markets, they had new challenges. Some of them weren't making it, and, you know, but they were new and young, so they, you know, could be explained that, you know, they're new and young. I mean, so we looked really great, and had we hung on for the last nickel, who knows? There's a lot of variables and unknowns in life and in business, and And sometimes it's, it's good to be proactive, is really what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it sounds like with your exit from Noah's, you timed it right. You know, this conglomerate came in, you didn't like the offer, but you saw that the market you were in was changing, and so you realized we should act now or run the risk of, you know, our product being more of a commodity than it is now, and now's the time to move. You know, sort of time.
Yeah, well, by the way, I wanted to, you know, I didn't mention this per se, and it's a little bit of a sidebar, but when the Einstein brothers offered us the stock deal, and we rejected it, what we knew that meant was we had to position ourselves to do, to take them on a national basis, and we were planning to do that. We had the team, we had the confidence, and we were going to do it. So,
yeah.
What I'm saying is, you build a strong team and a strong concept, and no matter who comes in your face to compete, you can take them on in one fashion or another. I mean, so in other words, we sold the business, and that was great. But had they not come back with that enhanced offer, we still would have been okay because we were already positioning ourselves for Plan B. I mean, it's like a decision tree. Some might be familiar with that concept, that if that, then this, and that, and then where does that branch lead, and so forth. We were all over it.
Yeah. One of the questions I see came in, and folks, we're happy to do some Q&A now. So in the bottom left-hand corner, just ask any questions. And one of them that I see came in is around sort of products or services or menu items to offer. And the question is, do we try to find something for everybody, in the store, in the menu, or do we try to stay niche focused and laser focused, or is it better to cast a wider net? And how do you know? So like with your menu items at Noah, did we try to put everything on there? Did we try to be specific? And how do you know what's the right choice?
It's a really good question, and there's no hard and fast on this. I mean, I could give a whole talk just on this subject, but I really literally. But I would just say this: I think that you need to sort of identify who your core customer is. Who's the heavy user, because that's really the backbone of your business. And you want to make sure that customer is really taken care of and has the offerings that they're interested in purchasing. If you're in the food business, that heavy user is coming in multiple times a week. You have to have enough variety to satisfy that customer. Very important to do some sales analysis and see, not just gut feel, but actually numbers as to, what products are really doing it, and are there companion products that are good to bring in. And then, there's a question of whether, in our case, at Noah's, we were very strong in breakfast, but we found, and we were doing very well, but we realized in some of these outlying areas that were lunch-oriented, that, we needed to do more business at lunch. We had to go through a whole menu redesign to try to figure that out. But I think that we still stayed true to the sort of the core of who we were. One thing that was mentioned to me a long time ago, and I think it's a great concept, is it's basically write a story. It would be a fictitious story, but the story of whatever business you have, and who the core customer is, and how you got started, and in your ideal imagination, really, and then make sure that everything you do in that enterprise fits in that story, and it's kind of a simplistic, sort of way to look at it, but I've seen it written out as a narrative that's been very helpful. Having said that, you know, one thing that many, especially I'm speaking now about food business, sometimes entrepreneurs can get sidetracked because you have a vocal minority. You have very few people who drive you crazy about X, Y, or Z. In the case of Noah's, this is going back some years, where are the oat bran bagels? You know, oat bran was a big deal, much like gluten-free is now. Where are they? You know, and we eat one of those things, I'll tell you that. You have to really like oat bran. Yeah. So finally, you know, they beat our heads in so much we carried them. No one bought them. You know, we'd sell 3 a year, but we had to have them. So it's a tricky balance, and that's why I can't give a definitive answer to this question. But I would say, don't be. What I realized at Noah's at one point was that you can't be held ransom by your customers in a certain way, even the vocal ones. I'm sorry, sir, that's not something that we do. Because you start going in all kinds of directions because of articulate vocal minorities, and you lose sight of your vision and your story, because it is, after all, your business. It's not the customer's business. You're going to be on the wrong track. Having said that, customers king, customers always right. Need to pay attention to them, especially the core ones, but it's your business.
That is a fantastic story, I think, for us to end on, Noah. I think that you provided some really tremendous insight. I can't thank you enough for joining us. I hope the entrepreneurs on the call enjoyed it as much as I did. Everyone, we're going to be sending out in about a short period of time an email with a quick survey where we can learn a little bit about your experience. And also in that email will be a link to Noah's website where you can email him any questions. He's nice enough to respond to all the entrepreneurs reaching out to him. Also a link to his book, Business Mensch. It's worth a read, trust me. Appreciate everyone joining us. And Noah, thank you very much. We are in debt to you. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everyone. Have a great day.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you.